Mother told you to go and see it while you're young. So you took her advice, got on a flight to California.
Hello again, friends. Back with another video, another song breakdown for you, and this one is a special one to me. The song is called Kerouac Girl, and the artist is the Illustrated Manual. And the Illustrated Manual is a guy named John Cook, who is a great friend of mine, one of my oldest friends. Actually, we were in bands together right when I was out of high school. My brother-in-law was in the band, and John was in the band. We lived together for a few years and have been making music together for a very, very long time. And I love this song. I love this album. So I thought it'd be fun to break this song down. We recorded this a couple years ago, and John was living in Wyoming at the time, and we had been kicking back ideas for a couple months, and thought about potentially having him record out there and then send stuff for me to mix. And somehow in the course of conversation, I convinced him to fly from Wyoming to my house for a week. And so he did that in, I think, January or February of 2017. And we just, that entire week, we knocked out a full-length album just up in the morning, all day, tracking. And so, yeah, we finished the full length in, I think, 7 days. And it was really, really fun. I had actually bought a mandolin a couple months before that because I knew going into it I wanted to have that on the album. And I also wanted to learn it. And so I was kind of learning this new instrument in the course of recording this album, and played on it very amateurly, if that's a word. And it turned out okay, thanks to Melodyne. But it was super fun to play on. This was an awesome song to record, and so I want to break it down for you guys. So let me play a little bit of the intro, and then we'll talk about it.
Mother told you to go and see it while you're young. So you took her advice, got on a flight to California, drawing your own line across the country, connecting the dots, the ghost towns and the big cities. And acid hit on the Vegas Strip, it's a scene that I'll remember. Johnny Depp on a flashback trip, riding in that elevator.
Listening to John's songs for me, I've been listening to his songs for a long time. It's always like listening to a great like American novel. That's what it reminds me of, like David James Duncan, like Jack Kerouac. Just the way that he writes and sings, the songs are always like super, super vivid. And so when we were talking about what we wanted the album to sound like, I had some pictures in my head of just like the instrumentation and the way I wanted to present John's vocal, which was very kind of like no frills, not a lot dressing up the song, just present it not plainly, but where the focus is on the vocal and on the lyrics because they're so good. And so I want to talk a little bit about the way that we recorded. This is the only song that John did not play guitar and sing at the same time. Every other song in the album, John played acoustic and sang at the same time with no click track. This is the only song that we used a click track on, and that John separated. He played the guitar first, and then he sang over it. And so let me play the acoustic. And the way that we recorded it was all the same, even though he played and sang separately. So let me play the acoustic for you guys so you can hear it. So it's two mics. We kind of splurged a little bit. We rented a few mics for this recording from Telefunken, which is here in Connecticut, and we rented a U48, a 251, and these small diaphragm tube condensers, Elam 260s, and that's what we used to record the acoustic. And the way that I did it, I had seen something that Eric Valentine did for an acoustic recording, which is where if you're playing, the two mics are basically, they're pointed at the guitar, one pointed down and then one pointed up. And I had never seen that before, and I really wanted to try it. And the idea is that you're recording not like at 2 points of the guitar, but the same point, but the stereo image is spreading out the low and high strings, similar to like a piano, where you have low on the left and high on the right, rather than sometimes when I have a recorded acoustic with one pointed near the middle of the fretboard and one near the body, it's a weird tonal balance for me. I usually just record it with one mic pointed around like the middle of the guitar. But I tried this, and I really love how it turned out. And so these mics are panned hard left and right, and they're pointed around like the 12th to 15th fret of the guitar, and they're pointed, one's pointed down at like probably like a 45-degree angle, and the other's pointed up. And when you spread it out, I'll show you what it sounds like when they're centered, and then I'll spread them out and see what happens. So here's stereo, and then mono. So it's a really cool way to get a stereo spread on the guitar, but have the tonality be, to my ear, very even. And the cool thing about it is if you're recording someone that plays and sings, it gets the acoustic out of the center to leave more space for the vocal. And on the other songs, you can actually hear John's vocal bleeding into those acoustic mics. And so that's how we recorded the acoustic. And there's a bunch of stuff on here. This is what it sounded like dry. And then I'm starting with a tape plugin. And then it's the same exact plugin configuration on both channels, pulling out a little bit of low mids. I was using this VMR quite a bit at the time. I'm not using it as much now, but you have an SSL channel, some EQ, taking out some 1K, boosting around 3, boosting a little bit. It's kind of weird. I'm cutting around 300 and then boosting back. Maybe I changed my mind. And then boosting a tiny bit of 200, and then filtering just a very little bit. And then you have EQ, compression, EQ, and then a trimmer. And sometimes, a lot of times, actually, I will EQ before and after compression, because compression has a way of undoing some of the EQ that you do beforehand. And so I ended up boosting a little bit more top, boosting a little bit of 600, boosting some more low end. And I wanted this guitar to sound really nice and full. So after that, I got another one band EQ pulling out a little bit of 10K. And then Decapitator, which is like saturation. One of the coolest things about this plugin is the filtering. So you can filter the frequencies and then the tonality between dark and bright. I use this a lot. And I don't know what the T model is, but I'm a little bit of drive, and then the mix is at about 40%. And so this is what it sounds like. I'll do it with and without. So this is without Decapitator. And then with it. Yeah, it's subtle, but I hear that it's working a little bit on there. And then on a lot of tracks is my favorite limiter. Doing some heavy limiting on this, just to really give it some more energy. Even though John played it very well, I want it to be right up in your face since it's one of the major parts of the song. And then I'm sending it to two buses. One is a reverb bus. One of the things in this album, there's not a lot of effects. Very, very few, if at all. But there is a little bit of reverb with the Valhalla vintage verb. And then the other thing that I wanted to try, I wanted more low end out of it. And so there's this boom aux, which it's sending here. And what I'm doing is I'm sending a little bit of the acoustic and I'm filtering out, treating it almost like a sub kick on a kick drum. I'm filtering out everything above 200 hertz, compressing it really hard, and then adding R bass. R bass adds, it's like a psychoacoustic thing where you're adding in bass frequencies that aren't necessarily there. And then C4 really just clamping down on these bass frequencies. And so I'll boost it up so you can hear what it's doing. Yeah, so it's really just adding a little bit more bottom end that I wanted out of this guitar to just give a little bit more fullness, especially since there's not a lot of instruments. And so that's the acoustic, and that goes throughout the whole song. And the guitar is in DADGAD, open tuning, and it's my Stonebridge acoustic it's my main acoustic that I use here. So there's that. Let's go to the vocal. So the vocal was recorded with the Telefunken 251, which is just a gloriously beautiful and expensive mic. I think it's like $8,000 or $9,000, maybe more. That's a lot of money. So we rented it, and it sounded fantastic. And John's a great singer. He sounds great in almost any mic, but this really, really sounded great. So this is his vocal.
Your mother told you to go and see it while you're young. So you took her advice, got on a flight.
I love, one of the things I wanted to do was pick up all of like the little subtleties in John's voice. And there's a lot of cool moments in between lines, little inflections that I wanted to make sure were there. And the 251 just like, it just put a magnifying glass on everything. So totally dry. John's vocals sounded like this.
Your mother told you to go and see it while you're young. So you took her advice, got on a flight to California.
And again, what we're doing with the vocal, starting with tape and going to a de-esser, pulling out some S's, a one band, pulling out some low mid, Decapitator, again, doing something similar. This may even be, it's almost the same setting as the guitar, but it's on the E model, which I don't know what that is, but mix a little bit higher, a little bit of brightness, a little bit of saturation. Again, going to the VMR, doing a bunch of little stuff here. So on the Brit, I really liked on this slate thing, the Brit end, when you punch up the drive, it adds a cool brightness that the other ones didn't quite have. A little bit of EQ at the SSL here. The Revival adding some low and high. Some compression, and let's see how much compression I'm doing here.
Your mother told you to go and see it while you're young.
Yeah, it's like a dB or so.
So you took her advice, got on a flight
without the VMR,
to California.
and then with it.
Your mother told you to go and see it while you're young.
Yeah, so it's just bringing out the high mids, highs, and then I added, this is funny, John really didn't want me to use a lot of effects, but I wanted something on the vocal here, and you can see the mix is at 2%. I don't even know if I told him I did this. So it's an eighth note delay, like super low feedback, like almost no feedback, just on tape, cutting a little bit of the highs, a little bit of saturation. And so this is it with it. I don't even know if you can hear it.
Your mother told you to go and see it while you're young.
If you turn your speakers or headphones up really loud, you can hear that. There's just a little bit of an eighth note delay. Let me put it on here.
Drawing your own line across the country.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. And then one more de-esser using from McDSP. I like this a lot because this listen feature, here you can really dial in what you want to take out.
And see it while you're young.
And so I'm focusing around 6K. Yeah. And then again, the limiter, sending it to a couple super, super short reverbs, a spring, which for this I didn't even really use that much of. And so with the effects and everything, vocal sounds like this.
Drawing your own line across the country, connecting the dots, the ghost towns and the big city.
So as you can see here, we did a bunch of takes of the song. And then John and I sat together and we comped the vocal together. And the thing that is, John has just some crazy, crazy ears when it comes to hearing things in the mix. And so that was a little bit of a painstaking process to get the right vocal, because I just think all the takes sounded great. And he really, really was dialed into whether it was the right delivery or the pitch. But it got to the point where I was almost kind of hearing I couldn't really hear the differences. And John's done a lot of his own recording with his own vocal, and so he's probably very hard on himself. But I thought everything sounded great. But we went through and did a comp of the vocal, comp of the guitar, and there is a harmony part that comes in about halfway through the second verse, and it was on the same mic, same setup, and you can hear what that sounds like here.
Riding in that elevator, you told me it's an old wives' tale that you don't believe in.
One thing you will see is there is no auto-tune. There is no Melodyne, no nothing on anywhere on any of the vocals on this album, which is quite a feat. But John's a fantastic singer, and we just did it until it was right. Now, when it comes to my mandolin, there is a lot of Melodyne on that. Let's go down to the Dobro and the mandolin. So when I was hearing the demo of the song, I had the guitar, the vocal, and then I knew there was going to be like a kick drum in it. And so you can hear the acoustic kind of has this cool rhythm to it where you're not totally sure like where the downbeat in the one is, but then when the kick drum comes in, it's very obvious. So here's with the kick drum.
The ghost towns and the big cities. An acid hit on the Vegas Strip. It's a scene that I'll remember. Johnny Depp on a flashback trip, riding in that elevator. You told me.
Yeah, so the kick drum we added in after, and we just found samples that we liked. And I have a ton of kick and snare samples that we just mixed together using Trigger. And we actually played it because most of the songs were not done to a click track. We literally had to like play with the track and then move it to match up. This one was a little bit easier because we did it to a click, but the other ones were a little tricky. And so the kick, this is a pretty intense kick. There's a lot of kind of sub stuff going on with this that I had to filter out, but I wanted some energy to it. So this is the kick. Kind of a modern sounding kick. And what I ended up doing was cutting out some low mids and then, cutting some of the low subby stuff. I didn't want it like an 808 kick. Cutting a little bit of highs and lows. The C4 to kind of clamp down on some of the frequencies that were poking out. This is a free plugin that I use quite a bit, just a saturation plugin that sounds great. The CQ, one of my favorite plugin EQs, and then the limiter. And so that was the kick, and that was pretty simple. That just goes through, the majority of the song. And then the bass, this was my Marcus Miller jazz bass, which I loved, but was also super, super noisy. I don't know if it's just a problem with that bass. I heard that there was some electrical issues with the bass just always being noisy. And so you'll see that I use this guy, it's a de-noise plugin, but I automate the threshold of it when it's in with the mix, you can't tell that's noisy. But at points like this, where everything drops out, I was automating up the threshold. And so with the acoustic and the vocal, the kick and the bass, it sounds like this.
An acid hit on the Vegas Strip. It's a scene that I'll remember. Johnny Depp on a flashback trip, riding in that elevator.
And the bass sounds like this by itself. You can hear the noise peak. With that, pet peeve, basses that are out of tune. Keeping a bass in tune is difficult, especially because I was picking it fairly hard. And what happens when you pick something is the initial attack usually goes sharp and then it settles. And so to get that in check, I use both Melodyne and this guy, just a cheaper version of Auto-Tune, just to catch the peaks. And so the retune speed is at medium, just to catch the peaks. And then had the SSL, and then a little bit of 1K, like between 1 and 8K. That's kind of the happy range for like the note of a bass. I find myself adding that a lot. And around 700, cutting a little bit of lows, because that was a great sounding bass, but it also had a lot of low end to it. After that, I love using this on bass just a little bit, the R bass, to add in some kind of sub frequencies, and then the limiter. And so that was the core of the song. the kick, the bass, and the guitar. So the mandolin, this is one of my favorite mandolin parts that I did on the album, and it was really, really not fun to play. I'll play it by itself. So yeah, that was a challenge to play. I liked the part a lot, and it had the movement that I wanted, but just to play a mandolin cleanly and in tune is quite a feat, and especially for someone who had just bought it. And so what's going on with the mandolin is a little bit of melodyne to catch some of the notes that were getting off time, and then I'm doing some kind of more extreme EQ because I want it to poke through, and I want more of the rhythm of it than just the note, because it's a very rhythmic song. And so I'm boosting some high end and then compressing it. Let's see what the compression's doing. Just a little bit of compression. Fairly fast attack, fast release. And then the decapitator, again, just adding a little bit of saturation. Without it. With it. Subtle. This was kind of like my tape machine a little bit. This is on a lot of tracks, adding a little bit of depth to the sound. And then I was sending it to this reverb. It's the Hall, 1.5 seconds. And so in with the acoustic, I really liked the way that it sounded in the track. And so here, I'll play it when it comes in.
An acid hit on the Vegas Strip. It's a scene that I'll remember.
Without it.
Johnny Depp on a flashback trip, riding in that elevator. You told me it's an old white.
So that I like that a lot, and that goes throughout. You can see the majority of the song. The only time that it changes is when you go to the chorus. I was doing a little bit more of mimicking what the guitar is doing, and so I'll play the guitar and the mandolin together. So I'm basically just mimicking the guitar on the chorus. And then there's a Dobro track, which John played a lot of the Dobro, and he did a really cool solo that I'll play in a second. And the Dobro is doing this. With the mandolin. And the acoustic. Yeah, so that was cool. And so that goes through the majority of the song. And so with just even these three instruments, the mandolin, the dobro, and the acoustic, you have a lot of energy and rhythm. It sounds like this. Add in the kick, the bass. So I was super happy when we got that feel, because I knew I wanted it to feel big, but I didn't want to go to like electric guitar. I didn't want to go to like keys or percussion. And so this was we struggled with it a little bit, but once I had the mandolin part and John added the dobro, it just felt really great. And so the other elements in the song, there is some percussion, and I'll jump to where the percussion comes in chorus 1. So this is percussion. This is all played. Some shaker, cabasa, and tambourine. So shaker and the cabasa there in the verse. And so that with the acoustic elements really filled in some more of the rhythm. And so that sounded like this on the chorus. And the tambourine kind of adding that snare, like where the snare would be, a little bit of like a backbeat. And so we had the shakers there. There's a couple of shakers, couple tambourines, and a cabasa track. And then let me show you the solo, or let me play the chorus with everything. So here is the chorus with everything.
I got no idea where this goes from here. Guess it goes on. Guess it goes on.
So on chorus 2, there's a really cool thing that John came up with on the dobro. It was a harmonic part. Let me see if I can find it here. So this is the harmonic part, I believe. Yeah. This was really cool. And then he had a rhythmic dobro. And what I ended up doing, I liked it so much that I doubled it, but I did like 100% wet of a delay. And I panned it. So John's part's here, and then the affected part is here. So those two parts together sound like this. And it's not even like perfectly in time, but coming out of that tag, it's a really cool part in that verse. Here, try to listen for it.
I met a stripper in a bar, a street performer in the park. Shooting in the dark.
That was a really cool thing that John came up with. The dobro harmonic part there, and then so chorus 2, we add in the full harmony, which John sang, and it sounds like this.
Now I've got no idea where this goes from here, but you gotta go in your own direction.
Yeah, he's such a great, he sings so tight to himself. He always sounds great whenever he does his own harmonies. And so maybe my favorite part in the song is the instrumental. And there's like a Dobro Solo, which like neither one of us were really like solo players. But John came up with, what he would do is we'd be writing parts for the song where like he would lay down the acoustic and the vocal, and then we would come to the control room and just be like, all right, what are we thinking for mandolin? He would have a dobro, I'd have the mandolin. We'd be listening to the song, just kind of playing along and like figuring parts like on the spot. There were a few parts where I had written something previously, but 90% of the parts we were just writing on the spot as we were listening and kind of reacting to the song. And I came back, I went and got lunch or went out and got coffee, and John wrote this dobro solo and recorded it. And it's just super, super good. And so here's the Dobro Solo. Yeah, I love that. And you can see here I'm kind of automating, doing a lot of volume automation on this song with the vocal and especially the acoustic instruments. There are just times where acoustic, like mandolin, dobro, acoustic, times where they just like certain things pop out that I had to control. And so here's the dobro by itself. Very kind of pokey sound. So I'm cutting some 3K, cutting some 700, boosting some high end, again, cutting some 5K. There was a LA2A plugin that we used a lot that I didn't have anymore when I opened the session back up, so I just put this one on, and it's kind of doing something similar. And you can see it's pretty heavy-handed. What I also did is I doubled the track and also put a little bit of a room on it to give it a little bit more space. The double sounds like this. And here's the second part. This is one of my favorite lines that John wrote. That's crazy. Let me listen to that in the track. So after this, it goes to kind of this broken down section for like the last 30% of the song. And it's just John and vocal, or just vocal and guitar.
Maybe I'll pass across again, or maybe they won't.
Missed fade, that's cool.
I heard you were living in Bend before you ended up back home.
And this was just a super kind of intimate, just John kind of right up in your face. And I was just automating to make sure everything was like super clear. You could hear everything. And so it's just him and the guitar towards the end. There is this little mandolin line that I kind of verbed out. You can hear it here. I like that.
Maybe they won't. I heard you were living in Bend before you ended up back home.
Just John's vocal here.
It's funny how that rubber band pulls you back.
Yeah, so this song for me was the highest energy song on the album, but even that not crowding the music, because I didn't want anything to overtake John's vocal, because he's never at any point in the song, he's never singing really loud or, you know, dynamically. He's singing fairly low in his range. And so even at the highest point, this is what it sounds like without the vocal. On we'll do the second chorus. So there's a lot going on, but to me it doesn't feel like there's too much going on, and that's a fine line between feeling full and feeling crowded, and I didn't want it to feel crowded. And this is, I mean, the lyrics in this are so good. So listen to these lyrics. These are probably my favorite lyrics. This second and third chorus.
Now I've got no idea where this goes from here, but you gotta go in your own direction. I felt like I was falling in love, but it was probably the booze building up in my blood.
That's a good line. So that's really the majority of the song. There's not a ton going on. There's the dobro, the mandolin, the percussion. You do see a lot of editing, and that's really just to make sure that everything feels right. I don't like editing to have things look right, because sometimes things look right, like they're in time, but they don't sound right. And so you got to really use your ears to edit things to make sure that they feel right. And this whole album was just about getting things to feel right. So let me play the end of this. Here's the last few lines.
And I've been down this road before, east and north to upstate New York.
Love this vocal take.
Where the wind and the stunted pines whisper lies at the tree line. Oh, you're stuck in my memory like a repeating melody.
This little line here. Love that.
Like a repeating melody.
All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a great evening.
After all the miles you covered and time elapsed,